The city was screaming so loud inside my skull that I didn't hear the bottle until it shattered 3 inches from my face. Glass exploded into silver dust. Something hot grazed my cheek. My phone lurched in my hand, the image on the screen jumping from fire to faces to sky. The chat detonated. I didn't flinch. Not because I was brave. Because the city was louder than fear. Downtown was a wound tonight, ripped open and bleeding neon. Burning trash bins lined the avenue like crooked torches. Police drones hovered overhead, their white lights slicing through smoke and rain. Sirens braided with chanting, boots, the metallic whine of surveillance tech. All of it slammed into my senses at once. And underneath it, deeper, heavier, what only I heard. The hum. The emotional noise. Anger had weight. It pressed against my temples. Hope crackled like static along my spine. Panic tasted sour, like copper on my tongue. Thousands of people meant thousands of frequencies. And they were all trying to occupy the same space inside my head. Stay with me, I muttered to my stream, though I wasn't sure if I meant them or myself. My hand was shaking. The phone camera caught it. Of course it did. Kalev. 312,487 viewers. Comments were flooding so fast they blurred into white rain. Behind you. Drones on the left. They're moving. Kai, they're moving. I pivoted, boots splashing in a shallow mirror of oil-slick water. A line of riot police blocked the far end of the avenue. Shields up. Visors down. No faces. No sound. Just the city holding its breath. Then every public screen on the building to my right cut to black. A second later, a familiar face replaced the smoke. Ronan Blake. City administration speaker. Alpha. The system's favorite mouth. Perfectly lit. Perfectly still. A dark suit, crisp enough to look unreal against the chaos around me.
If this story caught you, subscribe. More are waiting.
His image towered over the protest like a god the city hadn't voted for. Kai Arden, he said calmly, and somehow my name landed louder than the sirens. You are currently broadcasting an unauthorized assembly that has already resulted in 12 injuries and extensive property damage. The crowd reacted instantly. Boos. Shouts. Someone threw a half-empty can at the screen. It bounced off uselessly. I lifted my phone higher, angling him into frame. My pulse slammed against my throat. You mean people are bleeding? I shot back. Because your department sent armored men to scare citizens out of their own streets. His mouth curved, not a smile. A calculation. What scares them, Ronan said, is misinformation, and people who profit from turning fear into entertainment. The words slid under my skin. My chat erupted. Drag him. He's lying. Say it, Kai, say what he did. You think I'm doing this for views? I laughed and it came out cracked. Too sharp. I'm here because your order keeps costing us names. Faces. Graves. Behind me, someone started chanting. The sound hit my senses like a wave. Rage. Grief. Heat. Ronan didn't raise his voice. Kai Arden, he said again, and the way he said it, slow, deliberate, made the crowd's roar feel suddenly messy. You broadcast fragments and call them truth. You provoke escalation and call it justice. And when this night ends badly, as it will, you will point at us so you don't have to look at yourself. My fingers curled tight around my phone. You don't get to tell this city how it feels, I snapped. You don't hear it. For a split second, just one, the city dipped. A strange hollow opened in my perception, right where his voice sat. Silence. Not absence. Control. Ronan's eyes met the camera. And through it, me. You're not the voice of this city, he said quietly. You're just its echo. Something in the crowd surged. I never saw who threw the bottle. I only felt the spike of intent, sharp, reckless, electric, sliced through the emotional noise. Then glass, then heat. Then the world lurched sideways. People screamed. The police line moved. Drones dipped lower. The hum in my skull spiked into agony, every frequency slamming together like colliding storms. Kai, move! Someone shouted. The screen fractured. The chat froze mid-sentence. The city screamed. Too loud. Too much. Every fear. Every fury. Every hope collapsing inward. My knees hit the wet pavement. Neon bled across the world. Ronan's face was gone. The crowd blurred into color and sound and pressure. The last thing I remember before everything cut to black was a single unbearable thought pulsing through the noise. He's not lying. And that terrified me more than the bottle ever could. I came back to myself on a couch that smelled like burned coffee and ozone. For a long moment, I didn't open my eyes. I didn't need to. The city was still there, pressed up against the inside of my skull like a second atmosphere. Quieter than last night. Bruised. Hungover. But awake. Morning emotions are different. Less explosive. More honest. Worry hummed low and constant. Regret drifted like fog. Somewhere far away, laughter flickered, thin, stubborn. The city never goes silent. It just changes tempo. Don't move, Mira said immediately. If you sit up too fast, I swear I will tranquilize you. I cracked one eye. My cramped studio apartment swam into view. Coils of cables on the floor, protest posters peeling off the wall, 3 half-empty cups staging their own little graveyard on the desk. Every screen was on. Every screen had my face. Or rather, me falling. Wow, I croaked. I always wanted to go viral as a cautionary tale. Jules snorted from somewhere near my monitors. Hey, some people spend years building a brand. You achieved urban caution symbol overnight. Be proud. Mira shot him a look sharp enough to cut glass. Then she leaned over me, fingers already at my pulse, eyes scanning my pupils like she could read the damage there. You collapsed, she said, on a live stream watched by over 300,000 people. You hit the pavement. You went offline for 92 seconds. A beat. Those were the longest 92 seconds of my life. I've had worse, I said. Liar. I smiled anyway. It felt crooked. Jules rolled his chair closer, tapping a key. The main screen shifted from my frozen face to scrolling data. Aftermath report, he announced. Your channel trended #1 in 6 regions. We've got death threats, marriage proposals, a sponsorship offer from a hydration brand, and 3 separate government requests to talk. Ah, I murmured. The Holy Trinity. The city's emotional hum stirred at the mention. Fear sharpened. Anger fizzed. Curiosity buzzed like flies. Also, Jules added, grinning. Donations spiked. People love a martyr. Even a temporary one. Mira exhaled slowly. We don't know yet if it was an accident or a setup. The footage cut when you fell. We're pulling everything. Drones, crowd cams, police feeds. I sat up despite her glare. The room tilted, then steadied. The hum adjusted with me, like a living thing recalibrating. Does it still hurt? She asked, softer. I closed my eyes. The city wasn't pain. Pain was too simple a word. It was pressure, density. Imagine standing under a waterfall made of feeling. That was every day. I'd been born with it, this twisted gift, this curse that never let me walk through a crowd without becoming it. I hear them, I said quietly. Even when I don't want to. That had been the first thing I told a doctor at 12. I hear people when they're not talking. He'd called it synesthetic hallucination. My mother had called it imagination. Neither had stood with me in a riot. When I stream, I continued, it gets louder. When they watch, it amplifies. I don't just show what's happening, I carry it. Jules's smile faded a notch. That's why they listen, Mira said. Because you don't speak about the city. You speak from it. I huffed. Congratulations. That's the creepiest motivational poster I've ever heard. But it landed. Too deep. My gaze slid back to the paused frame on the screen. Ronan Blake. Calm. Untouched. Perfect. Silence where there should have been noise. My jaw tightened. He thinks he owns the narrative, I said. Thinks he can stand on a screen and tell people what they're allowed to feel. Mira's voice sharpened. Kai. I'm not done, I cut in. Heat rising to mask the tremor underneath. He embarrassed me. He twisted it. He made me look like a reckless kid screaming into a storm. You were screaming, Jules said gently. I swallowed. Then I'll learn to aim, I said. The city's hum shifted. Focused. I'm not disappearing, I went on. I'm not apologizing. And I am not letting Ronan Blake turn this into his victory tour. I swung my legs off the couch. I built this channel from nothing. From sidewalks and busted phones and nights no one cared. If he wants a war of voices, I looked at his frozen image. I'm going to make sure the whole city hears mine. The hum in my skull rose, not louder. Clearer. By noon, the city had already decided what last night meant. It always does. I watched the story assemble itself across 6 different screens while cold coffee bled into my tongue. News panels. Reaction streams. Official statements. Clips chopped so tight they barely resembled reality anymore. Evidence suggests the streamer's presence directly escalated. Known protest organizer Leo Marr was seen coordinating the surge. Sources close to the movement confirm. Sources, I muttered. The invisible army. Jules sat cross-legged on the floor, laptop balanced on his knee, fingers dancing. You're not gonna like this. Statistically. I never do. He flicked his screen up to the main monitor. Leo Marr's face filled the wall. Or rather, a carefully chosen version of it. Blurry footage. Time-stamped. Leo leaning close to someone in a hoodie. The angle was bad. The audio worse. Push when he goes live, a distorted voice said. The clip cut. My stomach dropped. Leo had been one of the first people to back me when my channel was still double digits and borrowed Wi-Fi. He ran food lines. Bail funds. He kept names when everyone else kept slogans. He didn't say that, I said immediately. Doesn't matter, Mira replied from the kitchenette. Her voice was steady. Her eyes were not. They're running it everywhere. They're calling him an instigator. And they're tying him to you. As if summoned, my phone vibrated again. Kai Arden used movement for content. Streamer linked to violence. Who profits from protest? The city's emotional hum thickened. Confusion layering over anger, trust souring into doubt. It felt like static crawling under my skin. They're rewriting the night, I said. They're manufacturing a spine for it, Jules corrected. People need a story that stands up. They're giving them one. By the time we reached the cafe across from Channel 7's glass tower, Leo had already disappeared from every positive headline. He'd been replaced by words like suspected and alleged and under investigation. And one other word. Influenced. By me. The cafe was all brushed steel and artificial plants. The kind of place that pretended the city wasn't on fire 3 blocks away. I barely tasted the pastry Jules shoved into my hand. My attention was fixed on the massive screen mounted above the counter. Ronan Blake sat at a white desk, framed by 2 anchors. What we are seeing, he was saying, hands folded, voice even, is the danger of emotional broadcasting without accountability. When personalities insert themselves into volatile situations, they become accelerants. The anchor nodded gravely. And the streamer Kai Arden? Ronan didn't hesitate. Kai Arden has a large platform, he said. With that comes responsibility. If investigations confirm coordination between his broadcasts and last night's violence, then yes, there will be consequences. The word landed like a gavel. I felt the city flinch. Mira swore under her breath. He's setting you up as the lesson. Good, I said, already reaching for my phone. I learned fast. 20 minutes later I was under studio lights, a clip-on mic cold against my throat, facing a different anchor and a countdown clock. The city hummed through the floor. 5, the producer mouthed. Ronan's face appeared on the split screen beside mine. 4. Perfect again. Of course he was. 3. I leaned forward. 2. For a heartbeat, the city dipped. Not the whole thing. Just the space where his presence settled. Silence. 1. Mr. Arden, the anchor began. Do you take responsibility for... I take responsibility for showing up, I cut in. For pointing my camera at what people live through every day. What I don't take responsibility for is a system that bleeds quietly until it can blame someone loud. Ronan turned toward me. Kai, he said smoothly, you mistake volume for truth. And you mistake calm for innocence. A ripple ran through the cafe. Through the chat. Through the city. He studied me. Not with irritation. With something closer to... measurement. You are not being persecuted, Ronan said. You are being examined. The movement deserves facts, not feelings. Funny, I shot back. Because facts don't bruise. People do. The anchor tried to interject. We talked over her. You incite, Ronan said. You sanitize, I replied. And in doing so, he continued. You make chaos attractive. And you make control invisible. For a second, just one, the hum in my skull thinned around him again. No fear, no anger, no pride. Just absence. It unsettled me more than if he'd shouted. The anchor forced a laugh, broke in, shifted the topic. The duel dissolved into broadcast etiquette. The city noise swelled back. But the silence stayed. Clinging. Wrong. As the cameras cut and applause flickered uncertainly, one thought lodged itself beneath everything else. If Ronan Blake was really the enemy, why didn't he sound like one? The message came from a blocked number. If you actually want to protect this city, stop performing and meet me. Tonight. 11:40 p.m. B-level parking. Old Meridian Media Center. Come alone. No signature. No threats. That bothered me more than either would have. I showed it to Mira. She said, absolutely not. I showed it to Jules. He tried to trace it and swore softly in 3 languages when it vanished into dead routing. I told both of them I was going anyway. Then at least wear something that doesn't scream easy target, Mira snapped, tossing me a jacket. I only own easy target, I said. And left before she could sedate me. The old Meridian Media Center had been abandoned since the networks consolidated. Its underground levels still smelled like oil and overheated circuits, ghosts of a louder era clinging to concrete. The elevator wouldn't go below ground. I took the stairs. Each step down muted the city's hum. Not silence. Never silence. But the roar thinned, compressed into something heavier. The air grew cooler. Damp. My boots echoed. Level B. Flickering fluorescent strips buzzed overhead, stuttering between light and shadow. Rows of empty parking spaces stretched out like a concrete ribcage. Somewhere water dripped. Somewhere else, something mechanical ticked. I stepped into the open. Nice ambiance, I called. Very serial killer chic. Your humor doesn't improve underground, a voice replied. I turned. Ronan Blake stood beside a black sedan, hands in the pockets of a dark coat that looked civilian enough to be deliberate. No cameras. No aides. No visible security. Just him, cut out of the city and dropped into the echo. Up close, he didn't look like a screen. He looked tired, not weak, not frayed. Just worn in places polish couldn't reach. You text activists now? I asked. Or am I a special interest? You're a liability, he said calmly. Which makes you interesting. I laughed, sharp. You dragged me into a basement to flirt with my potential? His mouth twitched. Almost. You came, he said. That's not bravado. That's hunger. The city's hum shifted at him. Pressed. Probed. And again, nothing answered. No emotional backwash. No ambient resonance. Just a blank space where a person should have been. It made my skin prickle. You framed Leo, I said. I didn't, Ronan replied. And you know that? I took a step closer before I could stop myself. The oil-slick air tasted metallic. I know you're speaking on every panel calling me dangerous, I shot back. I know my inbox looks like a hit list. I know you're building a narrative where I'm the problem and order wears your face. Yes, he said. Because right now, order needs a face people can hate. Something about the way he said it, like a man reciting the cost of weather, hit wrong. You're using me, I said. And you're using them. He countered softly. You turn crowds into content and call it voice. You broadcast escalation, and then act surprised when it escalates. I bristled. I show what's already there. You amplify, he corrected. And amplification is power. You feel it, don't you? My fingers flexed. You don't know what I feel. I know you don't sleep, he said. I know you walk into riots like confessionals. I know you let strangers bleed through your eyes because you think pain becomes truth if enough people witness it. I stared at him. You read my feed, I said. No, Ronan replied. I read outcomes. We stood there. The space between us, humming in a way the city never did. You want me quiet, I said. No. His gaze didn't waver. I want you precise. A beat. You think screaming is the same as speaking, he continued. It isn't. Noise feels powerful. But it burns the wrong structures. And you know which ones to burn? I challenged. Yes. The word landed without pride. That's the problem, I said. No one elected you to choose. And yet, Ronan said, stepping closer now, lowering his voice. Every night you go live, you choose who bleeds louder. My breath caught. Not in fear. In something sharper. Curiosity. You didn't bring me here to threaten me, I said slowly. No, he agreed. Then why? Ronan's eyes held mine. Because if you keep broadcasting the way you are, he said, they will either silence you, or turn you into a weapon. And you won't feel the difference until it's too late. The city's hum pressed in. He did not. Dangerous calm. I should have walked away. Instead, I asked, "So what do you want?" Ronan looked at me like he'd been waiting for that. "To see," he said, "whether you're actually the voice of the streets, or just the loudest echo." And for the first time since the bottle shattered, I didn't know which answer I wanted. If someone had told me a week ago that I'd be meeting Ronan Blake in back rooms and empty cafes, trading information like contraband, I would have laughed and asked what dystopian fanfic they were writing. Turns out the city writes better fiction than any of us. It started small. A location ping sent from an encrypted number. A time window. A single line, 3rd floor. Server access. 15 minutes. I found him standing on a metal walkway above a humming floor of government servers. Blue lights painting his face into something colder than it ever looked on screen. "Your people are moving riot control to the East District tonight," he said instead of hello. "And you're just giving that away?" I asked. "I'm redirecting," he corrected. "You're broadcasting." The city's hum trembled at the edges of him. Still no core response. Still that controlled void. I went live an hour later. Changed the stream title. Shifted focus. Let the crowd move before the barricades did. The East District stayed quiet. By the next night, we were no longer pretending coincidence. An empty cafe at closing. A service roof above the courthouse. A forgotten editing suite with one working light and 2 chairs too close together. Information passed in fragments. "They're preparing a warrant," he said once, low, while I pretended to stir sugar into a cup I wasn't drinking. "For me?" I murmured. "For your equipment. Your servers. Your infrastructure." I smiled at the counter lady like nothing in the world was wrong. "Then I should probably move the backup drives." "You already did," he replied. I froze. Ronan took a sip of his coffee. "Yesterday. At 2:14 a.m. I stared at him. "Are you stalking me now, or is this a premium feature?" "Neither," he said. "It's my job to know where narratives are built." Jules loved that sentence. When I repeated it back at the studio, he looked at me like I'd admitted to making out with a loaded gun. "You don't collaborate with the system," he said. "You get crushed by it." Mira folded her arms. "He's shaping you. I can see it." "Or," I said lightly, "I'm shaping him." They were not comforted. The exchanges escalated. He would nudge pressure points. I would ignite them. A leaked budget cut here. A spontaneous rally there. The city never went quiet, but its chaos started to curve. And every time, somewhere between the data packets and the rooftops, Ronan and I crossed paths. On the roof above an empty courthouse, the wind had been sharp enough to steal breath. I leaned on the ledge, phone in hand, city a glittering circuit board below. "You're enjoying this," I accused. "Define enjoying," he replied. I glanced at him. He was closer than I'd realized. Coat brushing my sleeve. Heat a subtle thing in the cold. "You like the game," I said. The push and pull. The illusion of control. He studied the city. "You like impact. It's not the same as control. Feels similar. Only when it's working," I scoffed. "And you're the expert on failure?" His jaw tightened. "There. A crack. Every system fails," he said. "The question is, who it takes with it." The hum shifted. Not silence. Restraint. I found myself watching the line of his throat instead of the skyline. The way tension lived there. The way he held still like motion was a decision, not a default. "You ever get tired of being the face people throw things at?" I asked. "You ever get tired of being the face people project onto?" He returned. I laughed quietly. "Touché, Mr. Speaker." "Ronan," he corrected. It slipped out before I could think. "Kai." The city hummed louder at that. Recognition. Curiosity. Heat. The next time was in a back corridor beneath a broadcasting center. The kind of place where wires grew like vines and every door led somewhere you weren't supposed to be. We stood too close. Accidentally. Obviously. "You're bleeding your sources dry," he murmured. "You're hoarding yours," I shot back. "Unhealthy coping mechanism. Yours is public self-destruction. Yours is emotional constipation." His mouth curved despite himself. "Careful," he said. "You're starting to sound like you don't hate me." "I don't hate you," I replied. "I just don't trust you." "Good," Ronan said softly. "Neither should." We moved around each other, a slow orbit. Strategy layered over sensation. Intellect brushing impulse. And underneath it all, a question neither of us voiced. Who was really using who? Because the more we coordinated the city's chaos, the harder it became to tell where his control ended and where my voice began. The video dropped at 7:03 p.m. I know the exact minute because Jules's entire body went rigid like he'd been shot. We were in the studio, every screen alive, every fan humming, the city glowing through the windows like a waiting audience. I was mid-sentence, ranting into a mic about zoning corruption, when his keyboard went silent. "Kai," he said slowly. "Kill the stream." I blinked. "What?" "Now." I cut the feed. The sudden quiet rang louder than any riot. Jules turned his laptop toward me. The file was already everywhere. Not trending. Anchoring. Leaked audio. City administration orders preemptive cleansing. The clip loaded. Ronan's voice filled the studio. Calm. Measured. Familiar. "If the east side doesn't disperse, we authorize a preemptive containment. Quiet. No witnesses. The narrative will hold if the right people go down first." My stomach dropped so fast I thought I might actually be sick. "That's not," Mira started. The audio kept going. "We can't afford another Arden situation. He destabilizes before we're ready. If he won't pivot, remove his platform." The room tilted. "That's fake," I said automatically. "That's spliced. He wouldn't." But the city's hum surged. Not confusion. Certainty. Anger knifed into fear. Betrayal crackled like static. The sound of thousands of people deciding what something meant. My phone lit up like a fire alarm. "You set us up. You sold us. Your friend in a suit eyes a butcher." Mira grabbed my arm. "Kai, listen to me. This is too clean. The compression artifacts." "Get off it," I snapped, pulling free. The studio screens were filling with his face. Ronan Blake. Voice of order. Voice of execution. The words replayed. Again. Again. Remove his platform. I couldn't hear the city anymore. Only him. "You've been using me," I whispered. The encrypted number on my phone stayed silent. Something hot and reckless surged up through the hurt. Fine. If this was a game, I would flip the board. I went live. No prep. No countdown. Just me, camera, and a city already on fire. "Don't let anyone tell you this is fake," I said, the moment the red light blinked on. "Don't let them pacify you. You just heard how they talk when they think no one's listening." The chat detonated. I trusted him, I continued, and my voice shook whether I wanted it to or not. I stood in rooms with him, I listened. And he lied. He used proximity to manufacture compliance. Somewhere, far away, glass broke. "They're not keeping you safe," I said. "They're managing you." The hum spiked. Rage, validation, ignition. "They're not scared of chaos," I went on. "They're scared of losing control over the story. Over you." Sirens threaded into the background. Drones rose. I should have stopped. I didn't. "You want to know what preemptive containment looks like?" I demanded. "It looks like armored lines forming right now in 3 districts. It looks like them deciding who gets to go home tonight." The city roared. Not metaphorically. In my skull. On my street. On my screens. Mira was shouting something behind me. Jules's hands were flying across keys. I didn't turn. "You don't need their permission to exist," I said into the lens. "And you don't need their narrative to tell you when you're being hunted." The chat blurred. The sound outside swelled. Then the feed stuttered. The screen fractured into static. For half a second, before the signal died, one final message punched through the flood. "Ronan Blake has resigned from all public appearances." The studio went dead silent. Outside the city did not. I stood there, heart slamming, breath ragged, the echo of my own words still burning through me. He didn't even fight it. He ran. The thought hurt more than the audio ever could. Because if he was gone, then whatever we'd been building in the dark had never been real. And the city agreed. It screamed until my vision went white. 3 days later, my apartment didn't sound like a city. It sounded like a hallway after everyone's gone home. Rain slid down the windows in thin, obedient lines. Traffic still moved somewhere below. People still argued, laughed, loved, broke. But the hum inside my skull, my constant uninvited companion, had thinned into something distant, muted, as if someone had wrapped the world in cotton. I lay on the couch and stared at the ceiling, counting the hairline cracks I'd never bothered to notice before. 1, 2, 3. My phone buzzed every few minutes. I didn't touch it. Jules had stopped updating me after I replied okay to everything for 6 hours straight. Mira had stopped trying to joke. The last thing she'd said before leaving this morning was, "Your channel lost another 40,000 subs overnight." I hadn't answered. The studio monitors were dark. No feeds. No chats. No faces. The place where the city used to pour into me now felt like an abandoned station. I finally pushed myself upright and crossed the room. My reflection in the black screen startled me. I looked smaller, not physically, quieter, like someone had turned the saturation down. "Congrats," I murmured to it. "You're a concept now." The leak had done what weeks of panels couldn't. Sponsors froze. Platforms flagged my channel for risk review. Protest organizers distanced themselves publicly, while DMing apologies they didn't sign. They kept my image. They just didn't keep me. Outside a siren wailed, and instead of slicing through me, it drifted. Flat. A sound without weight. Panic should have followed. It didn't. That was worse. I sank onto the floor, back against the couch, knees pulled in. The city had always been too much. Too loud. Too alive. I'd built my entire sense of self around surviving its volume. Around being the one who could hold it without breaking. Now it barely brushed me. And without it, I wasn't sure what shape I had. I picked up my phone. Notifications stacked like unopened mail. "We don't support violence, but you need to address the clip more clearly. This is what happens when you play both sides." Both sides. I huffed a humorless breath. I hadn't been on a side. I'd been a screen. They'd poured themselves into me. Their anger, their grief, their need for a villain and a voice and a mirror. When it shattered, they'd simply looked for another. The rain thickened. Somewhere below, a couple argued. I couldn't hear what about. Just the rhythm. The tired edges. My chest ached in a way that had nothing to do with emotion, and everything to do with absence. I pressed my palm to it, half expecting the hum to surge back. It didn't. "Who am I without you?" I whispered to the quiet. The question went nowhere. I thought about Leo. About the way he used to talk about building systems that wouldn't need faces. I thought about Mira, guarding the edges of a machine that had eaten most of her 20s. I thought about Jules, who treated chaos like a puzzle because feeling it was harder. I thought about Ronan Blake standing in an underground parking level, telling me they would either silence me or turn me into a weapon. And how easily I'd stepped into the second. A laugh slipped out of me before I could stop it. Low. Cracked. "They didn't even have to aim," I said to the empty room. I loaded myself. I stayed there until the light outside shifted from steel gray to bruised blue. Until the rain softened. Until the city's faint, distant presence felt less like something I was part of, and more like something I'd watched on a screen. For the first time since I was a kid, I didn't hear it. And in that hollow, echoing quiet, one truth finally landed hard enough to hurt. I had never been a person to them. I had been a symbol that screamed, and now that the scream was gone, so was I. Jules's server room was a converted storage basement under a closed tattoo parlor. It smelled like dust, solder, and citrus disinfectant. Cables crawled along the ceiling like roots. Old refrigerators had been gutted and reborn as cooling rigs. Every surface glowed. It was the kind of place built by someone who didn't trust clean rooms to tell the truth. Jules didn't waste time. He didn't ask how I was. He didn't offer coffee. He just pulled a chair out with his foot and hit a key. "Sit," he said. "And don't interrupt me unless you see God." The main screen filled with the leaked file. Not the version the world knew. The raw one. "First," Jules said, fingers flying, waveform integrity. He split the audio into layers. The room filled with stacked spectrums, ghost voices flickering in and out. "See this?" He zoomed in. Ronan's voice print is consistent in timbre and pacing, but not in breath pattern. "That's impossible unless it's stitched," I murmured. "Unless it's stitched," he confirmed. He isolated a phrase. "Preemptive containment." It glitched. "Compression ghosts," Jules said. "They show up when you splice emotional cadence, not just sound. Whoever built this wasn't copying words, they were copying delivery." My stomach tightened. "Deep fake?" I asked. "Hybrid," he replied. "Real voice, real meetings, real administrative language. Reassembled into a command he never gave." He pulled up a timeline. Dozens of fragments blinked into place. Look at the metadata, he went on. Original sources pulled from 3 different closed sessions across 9 months. Different locations, different contexts. All logged under the same internal clearance tier. My skin prickled. They didn't leak a conversation, I said slowly. They built one. Exactly. He brought up another screen. Names. Structures. Shell departments. Budget flows that didn't align. Your movement wasn't infiltrated, Jules said. It was mapped. There's a block inside administration running parallel operations. Containment, influence, damage, redirection. They don't crush protests. They guide their shape. They decide where pressure breaks something useful. I stared at the architecture forming on the screen. This is a machine, I whispered. Yes, Jules said. And Ronan Blake isn't the one driving it. Then what is he? Jules hesitated. Then he pulled up a personnel tree. At the center, a knot of sealed identifiers. Around it, public-facing departments. And between them, Ronan's name. He's not in the command core, Jules said. He's in the exposure layer. Explain. He's positioned where heat accumulates, Jules replied. Public outrage, media focus, political blame. Everything routes through him. The room felt suddenly smaller. He absorbs attention, I said. He burns it, Jules corrected. Every time the city needs a villain, it gets his face instead of the structure behind it. I closed my eyes. The silence around Ronan. The restraint. The way he spoke like outcomes were gravity, not opinion. He wasn't shaping me, I murmured. He was protecting a process, Jules said. And using you to move weight without revealing the framework. A rush of nausea climbed my throat. I saw myself in the studio. Voice sharp. Words weaponized. The way the city had surged when I'd fed it his face and his voice. They didn't turn me into a weapon, I whispered. I laughed once. Thin and broken. I volunteered. Jules's voice softened. Kai. He didn't run. The day the leak hit, his public access nodes went dark. He cut his own visibility. That's not retreat. That's sacrifice, I said. The word sat heavy. They used him, Jules continued. And when he started moving outcomes without feeding them the city, they burned him and watched you do the rest. Guilt hit like delayed impact. Hot. Crushing. The city's hum stirred. Not loud. Clear. For the first time in days, it pressed against me with definition again. Not rage. Not noise. Understanding. He told me they'd either silence me or turn me into a weapon, I said. Jules nodded. And they did both. I stared at the architecture glowing across the screens. At the shape of the real enemy. And at the empty space where Ronan had stood. Taking every thrown thing so no one looked past him. I have to find him, I said. Jules didn't argue. He just turned the screen. And gave me the last location anyone had wanted him to disappear from. The metro station had been sealed after a minor structural fire. Minor, according to the city, meant blackened tile, dead screens, and a tunnel that smelled like old smoke and wet iron. Emergency lights cast the platform in red and amber. The rails gleamed like open veins. The air was cool enough to sting. I found him sitting on a bench beneath a sign that still read Uptown. In service. It wasn't. Ronan Blake looked smaller without cameras. Not weaker. Just human. His coat was on the floor beside him. Sleeves rolled to the forearms. A shallow cut marked his knuckles. There were shadows under his eyes I'd never seen on a screen. He didn't look up when I approached. You shouldn't be here, he said quietly. Story of my life. I stopped a few feet away. The city's hum shifted as if it recognized him again. Not empty this time. Fractured. Tired. Anger bound tight around regret. They framed you, I said. He closed his eyes. You saw the architecture, Ronan replied. Jules did, I corrected. I finally understood it. Silence spread between us, thick but not hostile. They didn't leak you, I went on. They built you. And when you stopped feeding them heat, they burned you. His mouth curved faintly. Efficient. You could have warned me. I did, he said. The memory hit. Underground. Oil and concrete. They will either silence you, or turn you into a weapon. I didn't hear it, I admitted. No, Ronan said. You weren't ready to. I took another step closer. The platform felt vast around the small gravity of him. I tore you apart on a global feed, I said. I pushed the city into exactly what they wanted. Yes. No deflection. No comfort. Just the truth. My chest tightened. Say something, I snapped. Yell at me. Tell me I ruined everything. Ronan opened his eyes. And whatever control lived there finally failed. I am so tired, Kai. The words weren't dramatic. They were bare. I am tired of calibrating damage, he continued softly. Of choosing where anger lands so it doesn't collapse something irreversible. I am tired of being the acceptable villain, of absorbing violence so others don't have to show their hands. He stood, slow, like motion cost him. They didn't design me to change the system, he said. They designed me to make its movements survivable. The city's hum pressed close. Pain without spectacle. Then why did you? I asked. Why start pushing reforms you couldn't protect? His breath left him in something like a laugh. Because I was supposed to, Ronan replied. And because once you see the machine clearly, you can't unsee the parts that eat people. He faced me fully now. They were going to erase you, he said. Your channel, your servers, your reach. Quietly. You made yourself too visible to bury. So you used me, I said. Yes. And you let them think you were ordering cleansings, I added. Yes. The emergency light buzzed overhead. I needed them watching my mouth, Ronan went on, so they wouldn't watch the frameworks underneath it. I needed the city to keep throwing itself at me. So I could move outcomes without triggering exposure. My throat burned. And I repaid that by handing them exactly what they wanted, I said. You repaid it by surviving, he replied. That matters more? I shook my head. You don't get to absolve me. I'm not, Ronan said quietly. I'm acknowledging you. Something in me broke open at that. The city's hum surged, not loud, but full. I stepped into his space before I could think better of it. I'm sorry, I said. The words felt too small. Ronan's composure wavered. Just once. His jaw tightened. His eyes shut. When he exhaled, it was unsteady. So am I. He didn't step back when I reached out. My fingers brushed his wrist. Warm. Real. The contact grounded me in a way no broadcast ever had. Ronan's hand closed around mine without force, like he was making sure it wasn't a hallucination. The city's noise receded. Not gone, but no longer dominant. Up close, I could feel how much he'd been holding. How much of himself had been structured away. You don't sound like silence anymore, I murmured. His brow furrowed. What do I sound like? I searched the hum. Like someone who never let himself be heard. Something in his face shifted. Not power. Relief. He leaned his forehead briefly against mine. Just a touch. Just a breath. And in that small, unguarded contact, surrounded by dead rails and emergency light, we weren't the voice of the streets. We were just two men who'd finally stopped performing. My studio had never been quiet. Not really. Even at 3 a.m, it used to vibrate. Fans whirring, notifications chiming, the city's pulse threading through the walls. Now it felt like a command center after evacuation. Cables coiled like discarded veins. Screens layered with maps, data trees, budget flows, encrypted windows. Jewels kept opening and closing faster than my eyes could track. Ronan stood in the middle of it all, jacket gone, sleeves rolled, studying the architecture of the machine he'd lived inside. You're sure about this? Mira asked for the third time, arms crossed so tightly it looked like she was holding herself together. No, I said. But I'm done being useful to people who don't have names. Jules shot me a quick look, then back to his code. We have a window, 40 minutes, maybe less, before their counter systems register the access bleed. That's generous, Ronan murmured. They'll feel it sooner. Great, Jules replied. Love a motivated enemy. The plan was fragile. That was the problem. No theatrical leak. No edited villain clip. No explosive audio. Just structure. Raw documents. Internal routing trees. Financial redirection loops. Evidence of an influence machine so complex it had survived on being boring. People won't understand this, Mira said. They barely watch past the headline. They will if he walks them through it, Jules replied, nodding at me. I swallowed. The city's hum stirred, nervous. Curious. I'm not the story anymore, I said. That's the point. Ronan looked up from the screen. You've always been part of it, he said gently. You just won't be its mask. We exchanged a look that held too many things to name cleanly. Fear was one of them. Trust was another. So, I said, forcing lightness into my voice. We're really doing this. One final stream. No smoke, no face. Just the bones of the beast. Jules smirked. We're hijacking the narrative. Temporarily, Ronan corrected. Long enough to fracture it. Mira exhaled sharply. And after? Ronan didn't answer immediately. The room held. After he said, I am no longer useful to anyone who currently signs my paycheck. A quiet landed. Mira's expression softened despite herself. Guess that makes two of you, she muttered, glancing at me. We moved into preparation. Jules rerouted my channel through redundancies he'd never dared touch. Mira drafted fallback statements and emergency numbers, and probably 7 contingency plans I didn't want to think about. Ronan annotated internal maps with the precision of someone who knew exactly how to break what he'd once been paid to stabilize. Every so often, our hands brushed over the same keyboard. Every time the city's hum shifted. Not surged, not screamed. Aligned. At one point, while Mira and Jules argued quietly about interface visibility, Ronan leaned closer to my screen, reading a data cascade. You're shaking, he observed. Wow, I said. Nothing gets past you. He didn't smile. I hadn't realized I was. Adrenaline always came later for me. First, there was weightlessness. Then the fall. Ronan reached out without asking and wrapped his hand around my wrist. Not restraining. Anchoring. Breathe, he said quietly. I did. The city softened. The studio lights buzzed. His thumb shifted once, subtle, against my pulse. Still here, he added. It shouldn't have mattered. It did. Hey. Jules called. You two want to stop being emotionally poetic, and come look at this vulnerability cluster before it closes? Romantic, I muttered, pulling my hand free with a reluctant smile. Ronan's mouth curved. You invited chaos into a basement full of servers. What did you expect? We shared a look. Not enemies. Not symbols. Something built. The last screen loaded. The architecture stood exposed. The machine finally visible. Jules straightened. We're ready, he said. The city's hum swelled, not loud. Anticipating. I moved toward the central camera. Ronan stopped beside me. This ends what you were, he said. And starts what we don't know yet, I replied. He inclined his head. Good. The red light blinked once, then stayed on. The red light didn't feel like an invitation this time. It felt like a line being crossed. I looked into the camera, and for the first time since I'd started streaming, I didn't feel the urge to perform for it. No sharpened voice. No rehearsed fury. No symbolic posture. Just breath. Just presence. Hi, I said. The chat flooded instantly. Faster than ever. Names, flags, fragments of nights they'd lived through with me on their screens. Behind me, the studio glowed like a nervous system. Dozens of windows. Flowcharts. Financial paths. Internal memos. And Ronan Blake, no longer centered. No longer framed. Just there. For weeks, I continued. You've been shown faces, voices, villains. You were given people to focus on, so you wouldn't have to look at what was shaping them. Jules triggered the first release. A document tree unfolded across the main screen. This, I said, is what doesn't trend. Budget loops. Influence clusters. Parallel administrative pathways. A quiet machine designed not to rule, but to redirect. Protests weren't crushed, I went on. They were guided. Pressure wasn't relieved, it was spent. Files dropped in real time. Public mirrors populated. Independent servers replicated. The city's hum rose. Not in anger. In attention. I was used, I said. Not because I was weak, but because I was visible. And visibility is leverage. I paused. And so was he. I gestured. Ronan stepped forward. For a heartbeat, the chat froze into a wall of names and disbelief. Then it surged. This man was built as a shield, I said. A narrative endpoint. The place outrage went to die. Ronan met the camera's lens. Not as a speaker. As himself. I accepted that role, he said calmly. Because while attention burned me, it didn't burn what was behind me. The city's hum shifted. Curiosity threaded through it. Shock. A loosening. I was placed where damage could be absorbed, Ronan continued. So reform could move where it couldn't be seen. And when he tried to shift outcomes without spectacle, I said, they framed him, and watched me finish the job. I inhaled. The hum did something I had never felt it do before. It leveled. Not louder. Clearer. This machine, I said, only works if you keep choosing faces over frameworks. If you keep letting stories replace structures. Another release. Internal communications. Policy manipulations. Influence metrics. They didn't need loyalty, Ronan added. They needed predictability. A ripple ran through the chat. People weren't typing slogans. They were asking questions. How? Who authorizes this? Why wasn't this public? Where else does it exist? The city's emotional sound changed. Less like a roar. More like a field. Voices don't belong to power, I said. They belong to people, and people deserve to know what's being built around them. Ronan turned slightly, glancing at me. This was the moment. He stepped out of frame. Not dramatically. Simply. Aside. The camera no longer centered him. It didn't center me either. It centered the data. The architecture. The machine. I won't speak for the city anymore, Ronan said off to the side. I won't absorb what isn't mine to hold. The documents you're seeing will continue to publish. Independent, unmanaged, untethered to any one voice. The hum surged. Not chaotic. Alive. Breathing. Outside the studio, through the glass, I saw light move across distant buildings. Screens in windows. Phones in hands. Intersections pausing as people looked down instead of forward. The city wasn't screaming. It was listening. This doesn't end tonight, I said. There's no villain to remove, no victory to stream, only visibility you now carry yourselves. The chat slowed. Not quieter. Thoughtful. I felt the city press into me. Not as weight. As presence. A shared one. For the first time I continued softly. I'm not here to be your voice. I glanced once at Ronan. I'm here to give you back your own. Jewels hit the final release. Mirrors locked. Redundancies confirmed. The machine exposed. The stream didn't explode. It didn't crash. It settled. Somewhere in the distance, sirens cut off instead of layering. On the street below, I saw a group of people stop shouting and start talking. The city's hum changed pitch. Not from fury to peace. From noise to signal. I closed my eyes briefly. And for the first time in my life, the city didn't flood me. It stood with me. When I opened them again, the red light was still on. But the center had shifted. And nothing about it felt like control. It felt like release. Morning didn't arrive like an announcement. It slipped in. Soft light over brick. Steam from street grates. The smell of fried dough and burnt coffee drifting from a food truck that definitely shouldn't have been parked on this corner but absolutely was. I stood in line with a paper cup warming my hands, watching the city remember how to move without staging itself. No sirens. No chance. Just delivery bikes cutting through early traffic. A woman laughing into her phone. A man arguing gently with a vending machine. The hum was there. It always would be, but it wasn't pressing anymore. It moved like weather. Kai Arden, a voice said behind me, purchasing food like a civilian. I glanced back. Ronan was wearing jeans. Actual jeans. And a hoodie that looked like it had lost a fight with a dryer. I stared. Who are you, and what have you done with the aesthetic integrity of city administration? He took in the food truck menu with grave seriousness. I no longer work for people who issue clothing guidelines. That's tragic, I said. They clearly hated joy. The vendor called my number. I passed Ronan a wrapped sandwich without thinking. He accepted it just as easily. How does it feel, I asked as we stepped aside, to exist without a role? Ronan considered. Disorienting, he said. Quieter. I keep expecting to hear a talking point in my own head. And instead he added, there's space. We ate leaning against the low brick wall of the building across from my place, watching the city shake sleep from itself. A group of teenagers were arguing about music. A woman watered the same 3 stubborn plants she always did. A busker tuned a guitar he probably hadn't been paid to play yet. Ordinary. Glorious. I'm streaming again, I said. Ronan glanced at me. Already? Not protests, I replied. Not crises. Just this. I gestured with my cup. People. Places. The way the city actually breathes when no one's pointing at it. That won't trend, he noted. I smiled. Good. We took the elevator up to the roof after breakfast. The skyline was pale gold. The glass still held night's fingerprints. Somewhere far below, traffic found its rhythm again. I sat on the low ledge, phone resting loosely in my hand, recording, not broadcasting. Ronan leaned beside me, forearms on his knees. "What happens to you now?" I asked. He didn't answer immediately. "Some of the reforms are exposed enough to survive without me," he said. "Some aren't. I'll consult where I can. Build what doesn't require a face." "That sounds suspiciously like hope," I said. He huffed quietly. "Don't ruin my reputation." The city's hum brushed my senses. Warm. Open. Unowned. I tilted my head against his shoulder without ceremony. He froze for half a second. Then settled. The contact was simple. Unsymbolic. Real. "You know," I said, "for someone who lived as a shield, you're remarkably bad at resting." "I'm learning," Ronan replied. The breeze lifted the edge of his hoodie. My phone buzzed softly. A message from Mira. "People liked the street cat video. Don't let it go to your head." I laughed. Ronan glanced at the screen. "You filmed a cat." He was very opinionated, I said. "About pigeons." He looked out at the city, then back at me. "For the first time," he said, "the city isn't speaking through anyone." I listened. And nodded. "For the first time," I replied, "I'm not trying to make it." We sat there as the light climbed higher. The noise staying exactly where it belonged. Outside. Around. Alive. And for once, not inside my skull.